Grab your friends, jump in, let's ride. Feeling guys love everywhere as we chase these blue skies. Grab your friends, jump in, let's ride. Feel alive to see the world fly by.
That is the most chaotic I have ever been trying to start the lesson. All right. Hello, my name is Robbie. On here, I am Templar Knight. Every person who believes in God but does not go to church has a story why. But whenever two or more people gather in God's name, He is there. So this is church. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here. We're going back to one of my favorite things. We are comparing faith to cars. Or for this series, our walk in faith, or how we go about our daily lives, and who is a part of our lives. And taking a road trip. We all know the destination we're trying to reach, but what's the journey like along the way? So this series, we're talking about who's going with us on this ride. We've basically been talking about 4 characteristics, or 4 tiers of rating the characteristics in the people around us. Last week we talked about the 2 good ratings for characteristics. The things about people that excite us, and the things about people that we like. So this week, we're going to talk about the other 2 tiers. We are going to talk about the things that we tolerate and the infamous deal breakers. So most of the people in our lives, they have characteristics mostly in the middle 2 tiers. The things that we like and the things that we're willing to tolerate. More often than not, our closer friends, they have a lot more of that first tier, the things that excite us about them. And we've been using this 4-tier layout for this series with 2 good and 2 bad, but honestly, the more I was thinking about it, it's really more of 2 good, 1 neutral, and 1 bad. Because I realize it's like, with everything I've written, all the things that we tolerate, honestly, it's kind of necessary to have. And let's face it, we've all got stuff. We've all got things and people in our lives that have stuff about them that we're not super fond of. But we put up with it, and we tolerate these things. But these things are a key part of any relationship. Because this is where we have the opportunity to influence people. They have a behavior or a habit that we don't think they should have, or that we don't like, that we're just tolerating. We can slowly try and rub off on them. We can slowly try and be a good influence. I mean, a perfect example of this, something we've been doing here that many of you have been a part of. Something I tolerate in that 3rd tier. I tolerate casual swearing. I don't like it. I prefer not to have it around me, but it's not a deal breaker. And this all started because that guy sitting there behind the camera needed to stop swearing. And with people around me swearing, it was harder and harder for me to quit. So over the past few years, I've been focusing on not. And being an influence who is also trying to get the people around him to not to. So do you think I've been able to influence more people to cut back on their foul language? Or do you think more people have been able to influence me to swear more? And I can say with some certainty that I've been getting people to swear less. Or at least swear less around me. And honestly, there's only like 2 or 3 people who ever get to hear me swear anymore. So I'm going to consider that a win. And, I mean, there's still plenty of people who swear around me, and that's fine. Again, it's something I'm willing to tolerate. It's not a deal breaker for me. What it really comes down to is, with these things that we tolerate about people, do they know how we feel about it? And do they know we're trying to change it? Now, I often talk about how back in the day I was friends with some people who weren't great. But I tolerated them because I wanted friends. And I kept telling myself that I was helping them because I was being a good influence. I was helping correct their bad behavior. But they also tolerated me because of my stupid moral code. And they were an influence on me, trying to change the parts of me that they didn't like. So who was the bigger influence on who? I hate to say it, but I probably lost more than I won. I needed friends so badly that I was willing to be influenced and compromise who I was to tolerate things that I shouldn't be tolerating. But we learn and we grow. And in all fairness, sometimes tolerating a behavior doesn't even have to be about right and wrong. It can just be about a difference of opinion, like, let's say, taste in music. We all know I'm not super fond of country music, and I wouldn't listen to it on my own. But if I was hanging out with the friends and that's what they're listening to, I'm not going to leave. I'm still going to hang out with them because they're my friends. I'm going to tolerate their music. Just how I'm sure several of you are not super excited about the Christian hip-hop that I listen to. I know that's not for everybody. And I'm thankful that you guys tolerate my music and you stick around. Because we all know that that music has a big impact on me. And knowing that, you guys tolerate it. And I appreciate that. Because sometimes it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about being accepting and tolerating our differences because we have plenty of likes, plenty of things that excite us, that help keep us together. So it's perfectly fine to tolerate people. It's perfectly fine to have people in your life that sometimes you just need to tolerate them being there. But now we come to the fun one. The lowest, the fourth tier of these categories. The deal breakers. These are the characteristics about people that we just can't have around us. And if they refuse to change, or maybe they can't change these things, these are the things we have to walk away from. Now, mind you, there is no universal list. You yourself have to determine what things you are willing to tolerate and what things are your deal breakers. And your list might not be the same as other people's. I mean, some people, they won't tolerate you chewing gum too loudly. Or if you try and bring cheesy poofs into a car, because everyone knows cheesy poofs do not belong on a car ride. It gets everywhere. Sorry. Other people, they won't tolerate you because of, your political affiliation, your religious beliefs, how you stand about certain things and socially outward. That's why they always say, don't talk politics, don't talk religion on Twitch, because it's a gray area that can start fights because a lot of people aren't willing to tolerate it. Thankfully here we've made it abundantly clear that as long as you can show respect, you're welcome to be here. We will tolerate your differences. Tolerate ours. Oftentimes we see people that broke the law and they did horrible things, or, if they're willing to change, I'm willing to look past it. But if they go back into their old ways, if they're not actually changing from those behaviors, I'm out. I have heard too many stories of continued abuse in relationships that people just tolerated things that should have been deal breakers. And they made up excuses and justifications because they would rather tolerate than be alone. And loneliness can be one of the scariest things out there. That's why we need to set boundaries. We need to know what our deal breakers are. And it's important because, just as we talked about it the other week, you need to know what your boundaries are so that when they come up, you're ready. You need to know what lines cannot be crossed before someone tries to cross them. You need to know the answers to the test before you take it. You need to know how you're going to respond to the situation before it arises. Looking through my notes, I had a quick rewrite. I'm going to share a story from my life about one of the biggest deal breakers I ever had to go through. See, I grew up with this guy, and we're going to call him Crazy, because that's what we call him. A lot of you guys, you've met him. And yes, he knows I'm going to tell this story, and he's okay with it. Crazy and I, we've been friends since we were in diapers. We grew up together. His mom was my babysitter. And so we grew up, and we ended up going to different schools. And going to different schools, you get different sets of friends. And our friendship is kind of notorious because it has a pause button. If we were apart for too long a time, we just hit the pause. And as soon as we were back together, we just picked up right where we left off. And every summer since we were 14 years old, we both worked at his family's business. So summer rolls around, unpause. And all summer, we hung out. And then it was time for school. Work shut down. We went our separate ways. Pause button. Now, I struggled to make friends in school. We've been over this. I always say that I was a bit of a misfit because I was too church for the bad kids and too bad for the church kids. And my buddy Crazy, he went to a private school, so he had his people there. And during the end of high school, throughout high school, I ended up finding myself some bad friends. And they tolerated me, and they found ways that a church boy could be of use. They were bad people. And I was so desperate for friends that I tolerated more deal breakers than I should have. I went through some dark and scary times with these people, and honestly, I almost didn't make it. Ironically, I ended up finding God while I was socializing with these bad guys. But I like to compartmentalize things. So I would take them and I would put them in a box, different from my normal life. So sometimes I would be riding with them, doing what they were doing. Other times I was in my ride, doing my thing. And that separation made this all okay in my head. We had this separation because these two roads never crossed. And during senior year, Crazy ended up coming to live with me and my parents at our house, and he ended up transferring schools. So having him at my school changed everything because he was from a different ride in my life. And it kind of shone a light on the people I was with and what they were doing. So I kept that path hidden. And I knew it was stuff I should be afraid of. But again, we will tolerate a lot of things to have someone. And I was not immune to that statement. So even though we were now at the same school, he still had his other friends, and I kinda had mine. After senior year, I started hanging out with him more, spending less time with my bad friends and more time with him and his people, because his people were better than mine. And that was how I met Will. Will was Crazy's other best friend. Not exactly the greatest person either. He was loud and rowdy. And, I mean, he wasn't as criminally bad as the people I'd been around. He still wasn't a good guy. And that's just kind of how things went for a few years. I was friends with Crazy. Will was friends with Crazy. So we were like kind of friends by proxy. I'm not sure. But we all got along fine. But Crazy was that connection. Will and I, we didn't do stuff without him. I was still doing my church thing, trying to be a good influence on my friends. I don't think he meant to, but Will was kind of being a bad influence. So there was this like small power struggle between me and Will to see who Crazy's best friend really was. And I was working at a church camp in the summers, teaching Sunday school. I was becoming more and more active in church. I'd finally gotten away from that old group of friends because now that I had God, those other guys were sort of deal breakers. And now I had Crazy and Will. Crazy was my friend. I grew up with this guy, and Will was tolerable. And the two of them had a lot of things that they wouldn't do around me because they knew I wasn't okay with it. But the drinking and the drugs kind of started to come out because I would slowly tolerate more and more of these things because they were my friends. I didn't want to be alone. But I also knew I wouldn't be a part of it. So again, I have this ride that I'm taking with my friends and this ride that I was taking with God. And I was constantly jumping out of one vehicle to go to the other and jumping out and going back, just living these two lives. And I started to see through all of, Will and Crazy, they weren't that bad. I mean, not as bad as my last group. But they weren't good, and I wasn't having the influence I was hoping for. And to be fair, they were probably having as equally a bad influence on me. But they were my friends, so I tolerated it. My life with church, this path I was riding with God, started to take off. I was doing church camp. I just started my internship. My first youth program was going so much better than I'd expected. And I was finding that God needed a lot more from me. God needed a lot more of my time. He needed to ride with me more. So the more time I was riding with the Lord, that was the less time I spent riding with my friends. Because they weren't always down with that Jesus thing. Don't get me wrong, I never just completely signed them off. I'd still jump out and go hang out with them for a while, but I'd have to go and get back down the path God was sending me on. And then things started to happen when I was rolling with my friends that went from being tolerable to being deal breakers. Because God wasn't okay with me taking these other trips. God didn't want a part-time relationship with me. God didn't want to share. He wanted all. And honestly, the more I made God a part of everything, the more I wanted that too. So there were still these small trips off on the side with my small group of friends that I was clinging on to. Because although God had brought some amazing people into my life, Crazy and I, we went way back. And Will, well, he was Will. And then one night it finally happened. The straw that broke the horse's back. The deal breaker that I had to put my foot down. We were just driving through town. It was like 6 p.m. Like literally out driving, not this metaphor I've been using of driving. We were just out and about at night, riding in Will's car. Honestly, I don't even remember where we were going. Will was driving, I was in the back, and some guy with this loud exhaust pipe pulls up beside him at the stoplight. And for some reason, they both revved their engines. And I don't know why, but I can't forget Will just looked over and says, "Oh, I hope you got turbo in that thing." And right then the light turned green, and they both just took off. They got to about 60 miles an hour before they had to slow down for the next red light at the next block. So they're both sitting at that red light, and it turns green, and they both take off again. Now, it's not like this was some scheduled street race at night on an abandoned road. This was like stoplight to stoplight, commuter traffic going home from work. And these two cars were, well, they were being nuggets. No, nuggets is a lighthearted term. They were being stupid and dangerous. So from the back seat of the car, I told Will to stop. I said he's got to let me out if he's going to be doing that. Because it was that moment I realized I have a job at a church. What if someone sees me riding in this car, acting like this? I had a new image I had to hold up. And Will did not take very kindly to it. There were some words said when we got to where we were going. Will went inside, and I stayed outside with Crazy. Honestly, I don't even remember what we talked about. Something like I had insulted Will's driving. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I just realized that Will had become a deal breaker from my relationship with Crazy. And I had to walk away. When we got back to my vehicle, I left. And I was gone. I had to walk away from my best friend. I was able to tolerate almost anything he did. But he had baggage. His friend Will, that dude was a deal breaker. And he chose Will, and I chose to leave. So we moved on. Will and Crazy continued to do what they did. And without that journey, without me sneaking away to go be with my friends, I was able to give God my all. And now I had the woman that I was getting ready to marry. I had a young man that I was mentoring who was more than capable to fill the void left by losing my friends. And I had 2 little brothers that needed guidance. But most importantly, I had realized that no matter the cost, I needed to follow God's plan for my life. So our journeys headed in different directions for a while. Thankfully, there was a happy ending. Obviously, because you've seen Crazy around still. Bridges weren't burnt. Doors were left unlocked. Sometimes different roads lead to the same destination. Whatever analogy you want to use. Crazy and I reconnected. Turns out that Will became a deal breaker for Crazy's wife as well. And when she put her foot down, well, Crazy made the right decision, and he chose his wife and the mother of his children. Smart guy. And without Will, he and I reconnected. And we hit the unpause button like nothing had ever happened. It was one of the hardest deal breakers I've ever had to deal with, that I've ever been through. To walk away from my best friend. Sorry, that story went on a bit longer than I meant it to. So what's the moral? What important message can we learn from this? You know, if anything, it is okay to have deal breakers. You need to protect yourself. And sometimes that means controlling who is a part of your life. I know firsthand how much it sucks and how scary it can be. The fear of being alone. There's so much we will tolerate not to be alone. And for anyone who is struggling with that, I need you to realize one thing that I wish I would have known. You are never alone. God is always with you. And maybe he just needs a little one-on-one time. Just the two of you. To help you get things straight. You know, sometimes people, they're going to try and get into your car. They're going to try and be a part of your life. And you may not have a problem with them. But maybe they have a wet and muddy dog with them, or a bag of Cheetos. And even though you don't have an issue with that person, they got some baggage that you just can't tolerate. It is okay to make them choose. To say, nah, man, your dog's riding in the back of that truck. So either you can go in the truck or you can ride with me, but your dog is not getting in this car. Dude, you better not be thinking about bringing those Cheetos into my car. If you're going to ride with me, the Cheetos are going in the trash. You either throw them out or I'm out. The same works in our lives. When you drink, you hurt me mentally and physically. And I don't want to be a part of your life until you sober up. This is how I'm going to live my life. And if you can't let me live without constantly breaking down my decisions, then you can't be a part of my life until you learn that. But I will say the most important thing when handling these deal breakers: never burn bridges. Never lock doors. Always, always give people a way back. Give them an opportunity to change. You can't hold what they did or how they were over their heads forever. This goes back to our lesson of forgiveness. If Jesus can forgive us for what we have done when we are willing to repent, that is, not just to be sorry, but to change our ways, then we should be ready. Honestly, we should be eager to forgive and make amends with people that are willing to repent with us. Not just be sorry for what they did, but show that they have changed their ways. That's what we need to do as Christians, to be Christ-like, to love each other the way he loves us. So if there are deal breakers, it's okay to walk away, but always leave that lifeline. And who knows? Maybe the person who hurt you is also hurting. And maybe one day they will need you to help them find their way back to God. And if you locked that door, if you burned that bridge, you are removing another opportunity that God could have used you to save someone in their time of need. That's what forgiveness is for. That is repentance.
Grab your friends, jump in, let's ride. Feeling God's love everywhere as we chase these blue skies.